Safari, as I said, probably the most popular
that I just mentioned. This is Pilot Hiroshizuku, this is Daimine, and this is Sailor Ink Studio 123. These are just examples that I chose. But dye-based inks are mainly composed of water, as all inks are, and they get their color from dyes. So what this means is that the fountain pen ink, when it dries, is not waterproof at all. It's water soluble, so if you were to get your notebook wet and you were only using dye-based inks, it would bleed and the writing would kind of wash away. So if that's something that concerns you, which I know some people are really into having all of their notebooks archival, then dye-based inks might not be for you. However, I think that there are definitely more colors to choose from if you're looking at dye-based inks versus the waterproof inks that we're going to talk about later. But that's dye-based inks. Okay, next up, after dye-based inks, we have pigment inks, and these two bottles here are some of my favorite pigment inks. This is Kakimori, and this is Lenin Toolbar Atmospheric. I'll show you a little close-up of the bottles here. So Kakimori is known for making these really adorable bottles, but I guess we're talking about the inside of the bottle. So this ink is a pigment-based ink, as is this Lenin Toolbar ink. And you can see here, it has a different look. Okay, I can tell right away, it has a different look than the dye-based inks. This one just has more opacity to it, whereas the dye-based inks are a little bit more transparent. They look kind of like clear juice as opposed to a juice with pulp, I guess. So pigment ink is actually made primarily of water. All inks are primarily made of water, but also they get their color from little particles of pigment. So that is what gives pigment inks the property of being completely waterproof or water resistant. Sometimes some are better than others, and we'll take a look and see how waterproof some of these inks actually are. But that is one thing about pigment inks. The main thing that differs from pigment inks and dye-based inks is that pigment inks are waterproof. And because pigment inks are waterproof, they are actually going to be a little bit more high maintenance in your fountain pen. If you're inking it up in your converter and your fountain pen, then pigment inks are something that you want to wash out of your fountain pen and flush it out with water. I would say at least once every 2 to 3 weeks, and make sure that the pigment ink does not dry up in your fountain pen. So if you're somebody who writes with your fountain pen very, very often for like 2 days and then leaves it in their desk for another like 3 weeks, I would say pigment inks maybe not the best choice for you, unless you know you're going to be really good about cleaning them out of your fountain pen before leaving them in your drawer. You don't want these to dry up in your fountain pen because it could clog up the feed and give it some flow issues later on. So that's pigment inks, and I do have, this is Kakimori number 4 Karari and Lenin Toolbar Atmospheric Firmament. I do have writing samples of them. So here are the samples that I prepared of the Lenin Toolbar Atmospheric ink and the Kakimori Kotari ink, and these are both pigment inks, which as you all know now means they're waterproof. So I thought I would take a little water brush and just run over the color on them to see how waterproof they are. This is just a water brush. It's quite saturated with water, and I'm just running through. Yeah, that is, as you can see, the paper is getting wrinkled because it's just been Tomoe River paper, but the color has stayed completely and the words have not smeared. So that's a pretty good test of how waterproof these inks really are. So pigment inks truly are waterproof. Okay, so after pigment inks, I thought I would talk about iron gall inks. Iron gall inks, similar to pigment inks, are also waterproof inks. So they're not dye-based and they're not pigment-based though. They're iron gall, which means they have been made with oak gall and iron salts, which give them permanence over time and resistance to water. And what's cool about iron gall inks is that they have a quality of darkening over time, and in the minutes after you write, as the ink is drying, it becomes darker and darker as it oxidizes. So here in front of me, I have 2 bottles. This is Tools to Live by Fountain Pen Ink in their signature beautiful bottle. What's in here is actually KWZ ink, which is an iron gall ink, and this is Lavender Black Platinum Classic. And to demonstrate the quality that iron gall inks have of darkening over time, I thought I would demonstrate. This one is a sample that I wrote yesterday, so this has had some time to darken, and I'll just write again next to it to show you all how much lighter it is when it first goes on paper. Okay, so I'm just using our Kakimori brass nib, and there you go. You can see here it's like a raspberry, like lighter color, and as it dries, it gets to be this darker sort of maroon color. Even now, actually, in the seconds after I've written this, it is darkening. That's really cool. So one thing I will warn you about iron gall inks is that they've been known to corrode stainless steel nibs, so you also should not leave these inked up in your stainless steel fountain pens for too long, but gold nibs are actually okay. All right, so moving on, we talked about some of the different types of fountain pen ink, and type of fountain pen ink really has to do with what is inside the ink and whether it is waterproof or not. And there are other types of fountain pen inks, like I know, for example, Noodler's makes a bulletproof ink, and they make all of these different experimental types of inks that are really cool. But these 3, I think pigment, dye, and iron gall are the 3 types of fountain pen inks that lots of different companies make, and it'll cover 90% of fountain pen inks that you are researching in a bottle, at least. Okay, moving on, I'm so excited to be talking about some of the different qualities of fountain pen inks, and these are shading, sheening, and shimmering inks. I think that this is where fountain pen ink fun really happens for me. I know this might be like a divisive topic, and some people might disagree. I've definitely spoken to people in the store who don't like shading inks at all, and personally, I love shading inks, but without going further into it, let me tell you a little bit about what shading inks are. So shading inks are inks that have a quality of appearing to be different colors, some lighter, some darker, depending on where the ink is pooling on the paper on your stroke as the ink has dried and as you're writing with it. And that's what shading is. So a lot of the time shading occurs on the same color. So if there's a gray ink, it might shade really light gray, and then it might shade really dark gray. But recently, in recent years, we've actually seen some companies like Sailor and Dominant Industry, and then a lot of other companies, actually, No Troublemaker, Colorverse, like a lot of fountain pen inks have been including this quality of shading into multiple colors, which is really cool. And that is something that I love in a fountain pen ink. And I know some people, as I was saying before, don't love it because it's kind of unpredictable. You don't know what the fountain pen ink is going to look like when you're writing with it, and that can be a little stressful if you're writing an important letter or some document that you need. So I have some examples here of shading inks that I am excited to show you all. So here I have prepared a little swatch of some of our top shading inks. This one is Pilot Hiroshizuku Kirisame in this bottle here.
Let's discover. Hey good fellas, I'm Samuel Naldi and we are at Style of Zug. I decided to do this video when a customer of mine said that this pen was plain ugly. But she also said that she'd really like to understand it. So here we are, ready to understand why the Lamy 2000 is such an iconic and great pen. And here, there's one main reason that serves as a basis to understand the genius behind this model. And it's the mix between when this model was created and what has been created. The Lamy 2000 was designed back in 1966 by Gerd A. Müller, a German industrial designer which created notable works also for renowned brands such as Braun. Now imagine the amount of courage that is needed in order to create such an avant-gardist Bauhaus-inspired writing instrument when back in 1960 writing instruments looked like this. And what makes this model so amazing, similar to the Design 08, is the mix between the design, the choice of materials, and the care in manufacturing and detailing. And we're going to dive deeper right after I've had the chance to ask you to consider subscribing to this channel. It would be a huge help and it will give you the chance to stay tuned on future videos that are coming in the next days, weeks, months, and years. Thank you and welcome to this amazing community of good fellas. The Lamy 2000 was inspired by the innovative look of the Braun sextant razor. So Dr. Lamy and Gerd Müller decided to make the Lamy 2000 using a combination of stainless steel and Makrolon, which for pen making was indeed extremely innovating back at the time. And to be honest, it remains innovating even today as it's one of the only writing instruments made in Makrolon. The Lamy 2000 has everything a fountain pen needs to be complete and super enjoyable and a workhorse and a daily carry, and all of that in a very competitive price point that ranges between 271 Swiss francs for the black Makrolon edition to 375 Swiss francs for the stainless steel version. The pen is rather light. It has 25.1 gram and has a size when capped of 13.7 centimeters. So it's not the heaviest writing instrument you will have in your collection. Personally, I am more someone that prefers writing instruments that are heavier, but if you're looking for the heavier writing experience, then you should definitely consider the stainless steel version, which is 54 grams and therefore a writing instrument with quite a nice weight. When I look at the design, when I look at the beauty of the piece, the pure design of this writing instrument, I cannot not love it. The Lamy 2000 has a very unique snap cap that opens up easily and lets you discover the 14-karat gold nib that is available in extra fine, fine, medium, broad, double broad, oblique medium, oblique broad, and even oblique double broad. So Lamy has put a lot of effort into creating a wide range of nib options to give you the most enjoyable and personalized writing experience you might desire. Chapeau to Lamy for that. And what is the writing sensation? Obviously, I can't describe all nibs, but the ink flow is very good. So it's a good writer. However, being built into the barrel section, the nib obviously doesn't have any kind of flexibility and performs as a very stiff nib, almost like a steel nib. So somehow having a gold nib here is slightly irrelevant, but definitely gives more special aura to the piece. I mean, imagine if this writing instrument would have a steel nib, it would probably lose a bit of the magic that it has. All in all, like I said, it is a great workhorse. It's an everyday carry. It's a pen that won't let you down. It's very easy to open up and just start writing. You can fill this writing instrument up using a piston filling mechanism, which is pretty much invisible when you look at the barrel. But once you actually start turning it counterclockwise, you action the piston filling mechanism, and you're like pretty much surprised to see that there was even a cut in here that you can twist. So you go all up counterclockwise and all down to fill it up, and just beneath the metallic snap elements, you discover this beautiful shattered ink window. So these are the little details that make this writing instrument an extremely well-made fountain pen, even more if we then consider the pricing. As a last important information, the body can contain 2.5 milliliter of ink. If you turn the writing instrument, you'll discover this little breath hole that obviously serves, one, to fill up the ink, and number two, also to release the air in order for the ink to flow freely and to make it a nice, juicy writer. So you see, good fellas, you have this wonderful design. You have brushed polishing in macrolon or stainless steel, 14 karat gold nib, piston filling mechanism, even with an ink window, a very cool snap mechanism, an iconic design of Gerd Müller, now almost 60 years old. So 58 years old. All of these elements, all of these reasons make it an absolutely iconic writing instrument and a must-have for any fountain pen collector. And you, what have been your experiences with the Lamy 2000? Let me know down in the comment section. Remember that every time that you're leaving a comment, you're communicating with like-minded people that really appreciates the art behind the making of a fine writing instrument. At this point, I'd like to thank you for watching. Stay tuned because there's a lot more content coming up in the next days. And as usual, don't forget that together we are changing the game.
Lamy is a designer and manufacturer of writing instruments nestled in the hills of Heidelberg, Germany. The company began when C. Joseph Lamy started designing pens in the 1930s, and they moved into this facility in 1957. Lamy really began to make a name for itself when his son, Dr. Manfred Lamy, began designing pens in the Bauhaus philosophy in 1966. Bauhaus embodies function over form, and you can see this influence in their products as well as their architecture. Their headquarters is around 170,000 square feet, where they have more than 350 employees working 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. They've maximized their efficiency of both their time and their space, and the scale at which they're operating is beyond what we anticipated. Pride in the Lamy brand can be felt throughout the entire company, and unique elements like the Lamyteria company lunchroom, the Galleria, and the sculpture garden define their culture in a physical setting. When Lamy begins conceiving of a pen idea, it starts with collaboration and design. Depending on the pen design, it can take 3 to 8 years to design a single pen. Lamy not only designs the writing instruments themselves, but also the equipment that they use to manufacture them. The engineering building itself had no internal posts, and it was designed so that the ceiling would be held up by structure from the outside, so that the engineers can work with no impeded floor plan. One of the unique things about Lamy is they manufacture all of their nibs in-house. Let's take a look at how they do it. The process begins with a 3-foot spool of 1-inch wide stainless steel. It's loaded onto a machine that has a continuous feed and punches out the steel into the form of a nib. What you see here is a strip that shows all of the different steps that are involved in forming a stainless steel nib. The machine operates continuously until the entire roll is complete and is fully automated. The process is identical for both stainless steel and gold nibs, but because it runs continuously, they have to stop and clean the entire machine when they change materials. Tiny balls of precious metal will make up the actual writing surface of the nib, and they're laser welded onto the nib at this stage. Once the nibs are formed, they're then loaded into a hopper and ready to have the slit cut for the tines. This cutting wheel is about the thickness of a single human hair. The wheel spins at about 7,000 RPM, which creates an incredible amount of cutting force to cut through the hardened metal, and its coolant is used in order to keep it from overheating. Next, the rough cut nibs go into a polishing drum to get them nice and shiny. The polished nibs are then loaded into this mechanical hopper, where they're rotated and vibrated into place. This allows them to go into the next stage, which takes and punches the nibs down to properly align the tines. This will ensure proper capillary action so the ink will flow to the tip. With the gold nibs, it requires a little more handwork, but the process is fairly similar. They digitally inspect every single nib that they manufacture for proper alignment and to make sure that there are no burrs or anything that would impede ink flow. The final step is to get the branding on the nibs. So each nib is loaded into the machine one at a time and is actually laser etched with the Lamy logo in nib size. Some of the finer details that Lamy does on their premium products, such as their 14 karat gold nibs, is a final polishing and inspecting to make sure that everything looks really good. Now let's move on over to some pen assembly. We had a chance to see the, at the time, yet to be released, Lamy All-Star Vibrant Pink. Let's take a deeper look into how this particular pen is assembled. As part of every fountain pen, there needs to be an ink delivery system, and that's what these are right here. These are the components of the Lamy feeds, which are in large buckets that get loaded into this machine. The feeds are properly arranged into an assembly line so that they can be ready to receive the stainless steel nib. To ensure that it's been installed properly, a laser inspects proper alignment of the nib and feed assembly. It's then rotated 90 degrees so that it can be inspected from a different angle and be prepared for installation into the grip. But the grip of the pen has to be rotated in the proper position for installation of the feed. Once it's in the proper rotation, the nib and feed assembly can be inserted into the grip. Each unit is then removed and flipped over so that it can be prepared to be inked and write tested. Every pen that's manufactured is inked up and tested to ensure that it's writing properly. Next, the assemblies are placed back into their tray, where they move to the next station. They're then spot checked by a Lamy professional. All of the pens are tested with Lamy Blue ink, and they include a cartridge. The ink cartridges are loaded into a hopper, where they're then transported to be loaded into each pen. A separate machine is simultaneously manufacturing all of the caps. The plastic insert goes inside the cap. This is what will help keep the nib dry when the pen is sealed. The clips are then installed by hand and placed onto this assembly line, where it can then go into the machine and have the finial installed to hold the whole cap assembly together. Now we're getting into the final steps of the assembly. Each pen has a cartridge that's placed with a cardboard ring as a spacer so it won't get punctured as it's assembled. Pen bodies that have been assembled previously are then placed onto the grips. Even though they're being placed on randomly, the machine assesses where they are and screws them onto the exact correct place. At this point, we have completed pen bodies where they're visually inspected by Lamy Pro and ready for assembly with their cap. They're then put into trays where they can be shipped to distributors all over the world. Lamy makes a variety of different pen models, not just fountain pens, but also pencils, ballpoints, and roller balls, though the majority of what they make, about 75%, is fountain pens. Next, we're going to get to see one of the most highly automated processes in Lamy's entire factory, which is manufacturing their Safari. It's one of the most popular pens, and so they need a high volume of these plastic pellets, which they keep in tubs sorted by different color. They're sucked up into a vacuum and then put into this injection molding machine, which operates 24/7. Some of Lamy's other models require more personal attention. They're not as highly automated in their assembly as the All-Star and Safari. This pen in particular is the Lamy Ion. The Ion is a relatively new pen that Lamy spent 3 years in development with designer Jasper Morrison. Because of the more intricate parts inside the pen, this requires a little more attention to detail with some hand assembly. Also, because these pens are not sold in quite as high of a volume, it makes more sense to do hand assembly than to build automated equipment to make these. Lamy designs special machines to assist in the assembly so that they can have some consistency, especially when inserting certain parts of the pen. And every piece is inspected by hand to make sure that it's being assembled properly. Even though machines are sometimes used in the assembly process, every pen and every step is visually inspected by a Lamy professional. Pens are individually cleaned and inspected before they're prepared for packaging. The more highly automated pens, like the Safari and All-Star, tend to be in more the sub-$50 range, but the higher-end pens above $50 are usually the ones that require hand assembly. The Lamy Studio here is one of those pens, and you can see that there are certain pieces that are designed specifically for the assembly of the Studio. Even though there are hand assembly aspects required with some of these pens, it's evident that efficiency and consistency are still a critical factor, as you would expect with a German brand. The Lamy 2000 is kind of the flagship pen for the brand and has a number of special steps that were developed specifically for this pen. The pen is made out of stainless steel and Makrolon, which is a special material that Lamy's developed in this pen, and it is sanded in exactly 3.5 rotations to give it a textured finish. They've been manufacturing the pen this way since 1966. Lamy produces tens of millions of ink cartridges for their pens every year. These are proprietary cartridges that are designed just to fit Lamy pens. This machine you're seeing here is showing how cartridges fill from start to finish. They begin with empty cartridges that are put into place to be prepared for filling. Once the boxes of 5 are complete, they're packaged up into a carton of 20, because this is how they're sold to retailers. There's a final weight check on the carton before it ships out. In other regions of the world, bottled ink is much more popular. This is especially true in the US. The step you're seeing here is the bottles that are being prepared for filling. Lamy has 6 regularly available bottled ink colors, and sometimes have an extra special edition color. This specially designed machine fills each bottle to exactly 50 milliliters. There's a special tray that keeps the drips from going back up to the bottle after it's been filled. Each bottle receives a cap that is screwed onto an exact amount of pressure so that it's not over-tightened but also won't leak. If you're using bottled ink with a Lamy pen, you're going to need a converter, and that's what this machine is assembling, the Z28. There are a number of different parts and pieces in this converter, and this machine is fully automated to put them all together into a single working converter. The process begins with the assembly of the filler knob. This is the red piece that you turn when you're screwing on the piston assembly. These are the piston rods that will actually move up and down to draw ink into the pen. They're placed into the piston mechanism. Next comes the ink chamber, which is where the ink will actually be housed inside the converter. This is pressed into place over top of the piston mechanism. This step twists the converter to ensure that the piston mechanism is functioning properly. There's a metal shroud that's pressed into place to ensure that the ink chamber stays put. The final step is the plug that goes in the end of the ink chamber. This is what will friction fit onto the back of your pen. After this, the assembly is complete and it's ready for packaging. Once final assembly and packaging is complete, Lamy moves the final products to their multi-story warehouse. Lamy distributes their products to more than 70 countries worldwide, home to more than 10,000 retailers. It's evident looking at their entire process just how thoughtful they are about everything from their engineering and design all the way through their final packaging. It was an absolute honor to be able to get to see the process. They gave us more access than I think they've ever given anyone with a video camera, and it was a true pleasure to get to do it. Thank you to everybody at Lamy for allowing us to be here.
How to You cannot start off a fountain pen review. Objective. It's